What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Absolute Strength Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hunt, back with another episode 272. And today we are going to do a book review. The book is Myo Reps, The Secret Norwegian Method to Build Lean Muscle in 70% less time. And it's a really good book. It's actually a free download. So if you want to download the PDF and follow along with me, the link is in the show notes. And this is a book written by Norwegian strength coach. I'll probably butcher his name, but I think it's Borge. And Myo Reps is something that the concept's been around a long time. It's not anything new, and he's actually written about it quite a bit over the years. But it seems like over the last, probably last 12 months, last year, more people in the powerlifting and bodybuilding community have incorporated Myo Rep specifically with assistance work. So it's something I've wanted to dig into, and you know me, if we're going to talk about something, let's find a book and let's do a book review on it. So I think, let's go to the source. Let's go to the guy who's written the book. He's written the articles, and we'll dig into it. 'Cause I think this is something that you can definitely incorporate. It's funny how this happens a lot in the fitness world where a concept is not new. It's like a relatively old concept. Maybe it's packaged differently. Maybe it's just nothing at all, but then it comes back around. It gets popular, goes dormant, then comes back around, it gets popular again. And it's the longer you're in this game, the more you see this happen. It happens with dieting, happens with training, even happens with supplements, where something will be popular, then it goes away, and then it comes back, and then the young bucks will be like, oh, this new thing is awesome. And I'm like, well, if you've been around for 10 years, 10, 15 years, it might be the second or third wave of this concept. But no, this is a great way to increase training density, which is how much work you get done over a period of time. And I think it is good for a lot of people because it puts more focus into assistance work. And we'll dig into it. Don't worry, we're going to dig into it. But before we get to the book, a couple things. One, my new book's coming out. Speaking of books, my new book's coming out very, very shortly. That's all I'm going to say. The publisher doesn't want me to let you guys in on the title yet, but just know. I think I can announce it. I think the pre-order goes live in 2 weeks. So it'll be very, very short. Actually, less than 2 weeks now. About a week and a half. About a week and a half, the pre-order will be up. So I will be letting you guys know about it. And this is the book. I've been so excited for you guys to get this in your hands. This is my third book. And I'm not just saying this is by far the most excited I've been for you guys to get this book in your hands. So you'll definitely be hearing more about that in a week and a half. So be on the lookout. And of course, we got Bodybuilding for Beginners, got the Beginner's Guide to Weightlifting. Both of those books are available on Amazon. The link's in the show notes. We have all the ebooks and programs you want. If you want the old school Absolute Strength OG program, which is, it's the classic. It's the one that everyone, probably is the first program that whoever came across my content did. I wrote that in 2016. It's been a big hit, thousands of downloads. Everyone loves it. You got the Absolute Progress Powerbuilding program. Best of both worlds, build muscle, gain strength. You have the Absolute Strength version 2.0 peaking program. You got the bench press specialization programs, all those programs in the show notes. Of course, I'm a coach. If you guys want to take your training and nutrition to the next level, send me an email, kylehuntfitness@gmail.com. I know things are starting to open back up. Gyms are starting to open. People are going back to the gym. They want to make up for lost time. Hey, let's make 2020, the back half of 2020, productive. Because I don't care who you are. I almost guarantee you the first half of this year has not gone. Speaking strictly from training and nutrition, with everything going on, I bet everybody has had a subpar first half of the year. I know I have. I've done about as good as I've been able to, and I know a lot of my clients who've been working with me this entire time. We made the most of it. Whether we've had to do body weight stuff or we had limited equipment, some dumbbells, a couple kettlebells, very limited equipment. Hey, we made the best of it. But it still wasn't optimal. It still wasn't the best we possibly could. And I'm speaking for myself, definitely. When I look back at the first half of 2020, yeah, my training definitely took a hit. My nutrition even took a hit. But it doesn't matter what we did. It's about what we're going to do. Because now it's funny. I'm starting to get the bug again, starting to get my training going. I've got some stuff in my garage. I've still been just training in my garage. I ordered some more equipment. My training's starting to come around, and I'm really looking forward to finishing off the year. It's June. It's the 6th month. We're literally about halfway through 2020. A lot of people are already writing it off. They're writing it off like the year's a wash. And I get that. I understand it. It doesn't have to be that way, though. We can change course right now. We can take the back half of 2020, the last 6 months, and make it very, very highly productive. But you're going to have to make a change. You're going to have to make a drastic change. You're probably not going to be able to just do what you've always done. That's not going to work now. You're going to have to make a drastic change. In my opinion, the best way to do that is hire a coach. Let me do it. Let me come up with the program. Let me come up with the nutrition. Let me hold you accountable. Let's get on the phone. Let's talk about it. Let's dial everything in. That way you don't have to think about it. KyleHuntFitness@gmail.com. Send me an email. We can jump on a call. We can jump on a Zoom. Talk about your training history. Figure out what your goals are. Figure out if you'd be a good fit. Last but not least, this podcast is sponsored by PR Breaker. Got my hands on the new grape materia, the new flavor that dropped last week. I've already had some really, really good feedback from everyone saying they love it. You're going to be surprised. I guarantee you'll be surprised how good the grape flavor is. I know I was. I'm not, like I've said before, I'm not really a grape guy, but the grape flavor is amazing. It tastes like the Nerds. It tastes like grape Nerds, which I was always a fan of as a kid. It's really, really good. I had it this morning. I had actually had it this morning in place of my morning coffee, just because it just came in last night and I was excited to try it again. I haven't had it in a couple months. I had it early on when we were testing the formula, but other than that, I haven't tried it. So I was excited to get my hands on a few bottles and dig into it. PRBreaker.com. Use the discount code HUNT10. Save yourself some money. Get yourself some PR Breaker materia. The grape, of course, green apple, still fantastic. Blue Raz Cotton Candy, 2 great flavors of protein powder, the chocolate and vanilla, both great. Hunt 10 saves you some money. All right, let's get to the show. Let's get to the episode here. We're going to dig into a book titled Myo Reps, the secret Norwegian method to build lean muscle in 70% less time. Like I said, the book is for free. You can download it and follow along, or you can just listen to the podcast. All right. Let's go. All right, let's jump right into the introduction. It's been 10 years since I developed Myo Reps and published a series of articles about this training method. Myo Reps is based on a combination of science and studies that have been looking at the mechanisms of muscle growth and fat burning, but obviously also a lot of personal experience with currently 20 years of coaching people. One of the things right off the bat I want to talk about is, especially in recent years, the whole quote unquote evidence-based movement in fitness, and really just it's became like a buzzword to use. Oh, I'm evidence-based, or my training is scientifically sounded or scientifically backed. It's like a sales pitch. It's a marketing mechanism that people in the fitness industry have used really for of all time. Supplements companies have used it for a long time. Coaches, trainers have used it for a long time to sell books. But most recently, in the last probably 10 years, it's became even more, almost like you have to say it. If you don't say it, then people discount you. But when you read people's stuff, it's easy to see who means it. And I'm not even talking about people who, how many studies can you rattle off in your head? How many studies can you cite in your articles and your books and things like that? That's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how you write, the words you say. Things like that can really, once you understand the language of what that means, evidence-based, you recognize if people mean it in their writing, and if you're listening to a podcast from someone who's truly evidence-based. It shows when someone's not. And one of the things you'll notice about this book, and at least I noticed it, was, this guy is, definitely someone who's well educated on the science of training, but even just how he presents material. You're like, okay, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. He's definitely coming from somebody who has trained a lot of people. You can tell the actual experience, but you can also tell he's read some studies. If you happen to be following along with me, I'm going to skip around a lot, so bear with me. But skipping a couple pages, advantages of Myo Reps: time saving, lighter weights are easier on the joints and tendons, increases the blood circulation and glycogen stores of the muscles, has a fat burning effect, has a cardiovascular conditioning effect. It could reactivate muscle growth if you have stagnated. Let's take a closer look at what makes Myo Reps so effective. Myo Reps is a form of rest-pause training, where a brief pause is taken between repetitions, also called cluster training, or a short series of repetitions. And that's the real key. Really, when we're talking about Myo Reps, what we're talking about is what you would also call like rest pause training, a specific kind of rest pause training, or cluster training. Really, that's what it is. It's kind of his own methodology behind it, and he has a unique way to set it up that I really like. But that's like the main principle. Main principle is, hey, we're going to do a big rest pause set or just some cluster sets. And on the next page, he explains that, this isn't anything truly new. Continuing on page 8. Rest pause training isn't something new. Perry Rader wrote about rest pause training in 1946 in one of his Ironman training courses, and there have been numerous variations since then, some of the most popular being the 20-rep breathing squats popularized by Randall Strotson in his book Super Squats, Mike Mentzer's version of high-intensity training, and Dante Trudell's Doggcrapp or DC training method. Yeah, Dante Trudell's Doggcrapp DC training. That was really popular in the bodybuilding circles for a long time. Actually, I even think Jim Wendler, in his original 531 book, I think he talked about Doggcrapp training and how you can utilize 531 in combination with Doggcrapp training. And then a lot of bodybuilders used it back in the day on the magazines. You would see a lot of bodybuilders use DC training. Actually, you know what? I had one of my favorite bodybuilders from back in the day. I had on the podcast. I don't think a lot of people really listen to the podcast, but I did a podcast with David Henry back in the day, man. When in the bodybuilding days, when I was looking at Flex magazine, muscular development stuff, I always loved David Henry because he was a shorter guy. He's like 5'5", my height, and competed in like the 212 or 202 division. Just a complete freak. His physique was, insane. But he used DC training, Doggcrapp training. So it's nothing really new. Mike Mentzer's high intensity training really is what it was. You do like just a bunch of rest pause sets. They incorporate some drop sets too, which is different. That's not this. But and then with Dorian Yates, high intensity style training, did a lot of the same stuff with rest pause, extended set stuff. So it's nothing new. It's really just a unique take on it. Back to the book. You will soon learn how Myo Reps goes beyond just taking a rest pause between repetitions and what makes it into one of the most unique and effective training methods. It's a well-known fact that heavy weights lead to strength and muscle gains. So why is Myo Reps using light weights so effective? While mechanical tension on the muscle, i.e. the load lifted, is the primary determinant, recent studies have provided a more nuanced picture. You can get a robust signal for getting stronger and bigger with less mechanical tension as long as you expose all muscle fibers of a muscle to the load for a longer time under load. So, essentially, you compensate for the lack of loading by allowing that load to do its work on the muscle for more time. There are 3 ways to achieve maximal activation. Technically, there are more, but these are the most relevant. Number 1, explosive movement, i.e. throwing, hitting, jumping, or lifting a light weight as fast as possible. You will achieve maximal activation in the short acceleration phase of a few milliseconds, before the movement force takes over and allows the object to keep moving without having to apply additional force. The weight is usually 30 to 50% of your current maximum capability, so moving quickly is relatively easy. So like moving light weights really fast, like a dynamic effort, or jumping, throwing, things like that. Explosive movements, light weights, explosive movements. Number 1. Number 2, lift a weight you're only able to perform from 1 to about 6 to 8 repetitions with, but still try to lift as explosively as possible. The weight is so heavy that it will still move slowly, but the intent should still be there to move the weight quickly. All the repetitions at these loads will achieve maximal activation. Heavy weights lead to more neural fatigue versus metabolic fatigue. See the next point. So, number 1, explosive movements. Number 2, heavy weights from 1 rep, so a maximal attempt, to about 6 to 8 reps. Then number 3, lift moderate to light weights until fatigue. Weights you can do at least 8 repetitions with. The most weakest muscle fibers with the most endurance capabilities are activated first, then progressively larger and more explosive muscle fibers are activated when the smallest get exhausted. You'll also feel a burn in the muscle from various waste products accumulating and a change in the pH level of the muscle's environment. This is referred to as metabolic fatigue. The nervous system will also get fatigued during the last repetitions, but less so than with heavier weights. You should achieve close to maximal activation on the 3 to 6 final repetitions of the set, depending on how heavy the weights you're lifting are. All right, so really what we're talking about. So the 3 things he's talking about: 1, explosive movements; 2, heavier weights from 1 rep to about 8 reps; and then 3, from 8 reps and more, so using a lighter weight, higher reps, but lifting until fatigue. I want to spend a little time here because going through the third point there, it might have got a little confusing, but really what he's talking about there is something called Hinneman's size principle, or the principle of orderly recruitment, which states that low threshold motor units are recruited before high threshold motor units. Essentially, your nervous system activates muscle fibers based on how much force you need to produce. It starts with type 1 fibers, activating more and more until it needs to call upon type 2 muscle fibers, and then activates more and more until you can't produce any more force, which really leads us to the concept of effective reps, which we're going to talk about more because it's a big part of this whole philosophy and this guy in particular. But effective reps is the idea that the last few reps right before you fail are the only ones that matter, or matter most for hypertrophy. And we're going to talk about this more, but to kind of help throw this all together and patch together. So let's say we're doing a set of 15, and you start out, and initially it's just those low threshold motor units, type 1 fibers for the first few reps, and then slowly it starts incorporating some of the type 2 muscle fibers. But then let's say you stop at like 10 reps. Really, going by this theory, not all of your muscle fibers were activated. You never really got maximum activation if you stop at 10 or 5 reps in reserve. You never really got those last effective reps, which those last 5 reps or so would be the quote effective reps where maximum recruitment took place. And this really makes sense when you think about it, because really when you stop really far from failure, so 5+ reps from failure, there tends to not be as good hypertrophy response to training. That's why you got to get pretty close to failure. Don't have to go to failure, but you want to get pretty close to failure to get a hypertrophic response. You don't need that for strength so much. You can get a better strength response without going to failure than you can muscle building response. You want to get pretty close to failure. Although this is we could do a whole topic. We could do a whole podcast on training to failure, the pros, cons, and what have you. But just big picture umbrella theme here, you want to get pretty close to failure when training for hypertrophy. All right, back to the book. Some studies have shown that you don't get the same muscle activation at lighter loads, but I have seen data where you get higher spikes of activation when using Myo Reps that are equal to the spikes seen with heavier loads. We can tell that the first and the second point give maximum activation. On the other hand, we can't just jump around or lift maximum weight all the time, so what do we do with number 3? It's logical that we could improve the training result by maintaining maximal activation so that every succeeding repetition is effective. That as many muscle fibers as possible are exposed to the tension and not just the low or medium threshold fibers. Effective reps is a term I kind of made up, but I have seen others in the business adopting it as recent research has surfaced validating that this is indeed true. So really the concept of effective reps is really at the heart of Myo Reps. His whole idea with creating Myo Reps is, okay, we understand that if we look at the effective reps philosophy, so it's really only those last like 5 reps. 5 seems to be like the magic number here. And I'm not really here to argue the concept of effective reps in detail. We'll talk about it here. But just think of it this way. So the last 5 reps of a set with high rep sets are the ones that are effective. So how can we come up with a system that cuts out the middleman, cut out the beginning part, cut out all the wasted reps in the front? If we can cut out all those wasted reps and just go right to the effective reps, we can save time and maybe even improve effectiveness. And really, that's what Myo Reps is. It's funny because even the concept of effective reps has picked up a lot of steam in the scientific community in the last year or so. But that's an old school concept too. I mean, even Arnold talked about it in Pumping Iron. He said something along the lines of, only the last couple reps of a set are the ones that matter. He even said that in Pumping Iron. And it makes a lot of sense because if you think about it, not all reps are created equal. I mean, the first couple reps of a set, they're the ones that feel really easy. Then the last ones are more challenging. And then it kind of, this talk quickly goes to, okay, well, if the last few reps are the ones that really matter, well, how close to failure do we need to get? Do we have to go to failure? And really, based on the data, there's probably not much difference between going to complete, we're talking about, building muscle here, going from complete failure to leaving 1 to 3 reps in reserve. Leaving 1 to 3 reps in the tank, that's still not an easy set. Sometimes when people think, oh, so you don't have to go to failure, you can leave a couple reps in the tank and kind of leave something in the gym, so to speak, it seems easy. But really, I think a lot of times people, they use it as an excuse to train easier. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we're not training to failure. We're leaving a couple reps in the tank. That's why it's so important for me when I'm working with people is to really grasp the RPE and reps in reserve system. Just because it's really good to, even more so than using it as a way to program your training, it's just a good way to analyze your training. And in the workout, analyze your workouts, analyze your sets. And it's tough. Even people who've been in the gym for a long time, even very experienced trainers, people who've been experienced with RPE and use it all the time, it's still tough. It's still something that I always kind of like to tell my clients that it's something that it's a skill that you always need to practice. And one of the ways to practice it is sometimes I recommend, one of the reasons why I like to throw in AMRAP sets is really just to wake people up. Because especially with assistance work, it's easy just to kind of get into a habit of using about the same weights all the time, not really focusing on beating the logbook with our assistance work, and we just like throw on weight and like, oh, that's a 8 RPE, that's 2 reps in reserve. We'll just use this weight. But then occasionally, if we'll say, all right, we'll work up to sometimes I'll program this. I'll say, okay, we'll use your 8 RPE, 2 reps in reserve weight. And then on the last set, go to complete failure, 10 RPE. You'd be surprised at how more reps people get, And it's it's a wake-up call. It's okay, so if you're using, let's say 100 pounds for something for sets at 8, and you're like, okay, that feels like an 8 RPE. And then you do 15 reps on your AMRAP. Okay, well, maybe we should reevaluate the loading for next time. He talks about this on page 18. At lighter loads, research shows that you need to train close to the point of failure to get maximum benefits, but having 1 rep in reserve can allow you to recover faster than going to complete failure while still providing the same benefits. You should have some experience with training to absolute failure to determine your individual fatigue point before commencing Myo Reps. But a good rule of thumb is that you can stop and put the weight down when rep speed slows noticeably. If you push to failure, it will limit the number of total reps you can get. If you stop several reps from failure, you would need to compensate by doing several sets in the Myo Rep series and also shortening rest periods. The trick is to manage fatigue, not chase it. I like that last sentence. I might have to use that. The trick is to manage fatigue, not chase it. And really, anytime we're talking about training to failure, really what we're talking about is balancing fatigue, benefits to fatigue. And if we can get the same benefits with better recovery by not going to failure, then why wouldn't we do that? And this is really important on the main work. So squat, bench, deadlift, the close variations, the stuff that are, the movements that are highly fatiguing. Those are the ones where we want to be careful with and not push to failure if we don't have to. Leave something in the tank on those ones so we can train more frequently and accumulate more volume over time, over the course of a week, over the course of a month. Now, on assistance work, it's not as important. You can get away with training closer to failure on assistance work. And really, when we're talking about Myo Reps, that's what we're talking about. We're going to use Myo Reps with assistance work. So let's dig in. Let's talk about what this is. Kind of done enough background information. Let's figure out what this is all about. The Myo Rep Set in brief. First set is called the activation set, and that's done for 15 to 30 reps. So you pick a weight, do 15 to 30 reps. Pause for 5 to 15 seconds, and then do another 3 to 5 reps. Pause for 5 to 15 seconds, and so on until you've done up to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps. The key is to only take a short break before you do another set with more reps of the same load. Myo Reps requires that you find that subtle balance between resting just enough to allow more reps while still maintaining a high activation level. So here's how it breaks down. So you pick a weight and you do 15 to 30 reps with it. And you want to go pretty close to failure, about right around like a 9 RPE, leave about 1 rep in the tank. And then take 5 to 15 seconds of rest. I normally like to just take deep breaths, about 15 seconds. Do another 3 to 5 reps. Another 3 to 5, or 5 to 15 seconds, then another 3 to 5 reps, and so on, up to 5 additional Myo reps or Myo sets. Back to the book. I tend to use 30 to 50% of your current 1 RM, 1 repetition maximum. For beginners, 30%, intermediates, 40%, and advanced, 50% in a given exercise as a starting point. Now, the number of reps on the activation set will fall anywhere between 15 to 25 reps or even more. So a simpler way is to just pre-select a rep range from 15 to 25, whatever you enjoy doing, and this will actually correlate well with the testing approach, incidentally. I tend to recommend a minimum of 8 to 10 reps to get the maximum benefits from Myo Reps. This is because you already have close to maximum fiber recruitment at heavier loads, approximately 80% of 1RM. So since I mostly do this with assistance work, I don't even really worry about the calculating your 1RM, but 30 to 50% is kind of just a ballpark idea. And he talks 15 to 30 reps. I personally tend to use more like 12 to 25, but we're kind of splitting hairs there. Continuing. To stay at the just right fatigue level to maintain high activation, you shouldn't rest more than 5 to 15 seconds between sets in the Myo Rep series. Instead of checking your watch and lose focus on what you're doing, you should instead just count how many times you inhale and exhale. That's what I like to do, like deep breaths. Breathe in deep, exhale deep. Combine that with getting the just right number of total reps at the loads we're working with. I have come up with a simple, easy to remember rule for Myo Reps. 3 to 5 reps for 3 to 5 sets with 3 to 5 deep rests of rest in between sets. So that kind of makes it easy. So a Myo Rep set may look like this: 20 rep activation set followed by 3 sets of 5 for the Myo Rep series. Or you could do 22 reps with 4 sets of 3 Myo Rep series. Or you can do 25 reps with 4 sets of 4 and then a 5th set of 3. I like to personally think of it like this. So however many reps we do on the activation set, for the Myo Reps, for the back offs, for the down sets, I like to do about 25 to 50% of the reps. So to make it easy, so let's say we did a 12 rep activation set. So then on our back offs, we would do 3 to 6 reps. Or if we did a 20 rep activation set, we would do 5 to 10 reps on the back off sets. And that's just how I do it personally. And then determining how many sets we do, which we're going to talk about here in a second. For the most part, I always just try to do 5. Like, that's just my goal. Like, I just think of it as like, we're going to do our one activation set, and then the goal is to do 5 sets of myo reps or back offs. Now, if something happens where you just are fatiguing too much and you can't get all 5, then you could stop at 3 or 4 as well. And that's kind of what we're going to get into. So moving on, specifically talking about volume. So back to the book. How many sets and reps should I do? Is probably one of the most common questions I hear. Also, why do people from Norway swear so much? There's probably no right answer to either one of these questions, but I can do some damn good guessing at the first one. First, consider a normal set. 3 sets of 20 reps, 1 to 2 minutes rest between sets. If you train to failure on each set, there will be a natural drop in the number of reps you can perform set to set. For demonstration purposes, let's assume you do 20 in the first set, 18 in the second, and 16 in the third. Let's also assume it takes 3 seconds per rep, 2 seconds down, 1 second up. We also assume that the last 5 reps are reaching maximum levels of muscle fiber activation, which is pretty close to the truth when looking at various studies. So, total amount of reps, 20 plus 18 plus 16 equals 54. However, the effective reps are only 5, 5, and 5, so 15. Total duration, about 7 minutes, if you take 2 minutes of rest between sets. So that's if you do 3 sets of 1 set of 20, 1 set of 18, 1 set of 16, that's 54 total reps, 15 effective reps, and it takes about 7 minutes. Now let's compare this to Myo Reps at a 20 rep activation set and then 4 sets of 5 Myo Rep back offs. The total number of reps is 40, so less than 54. However, the effective reps are 25, 5 in the activation and then all of the Myo Rep sets. So we're doing 25 effective reps compared to 15. And then total duration is about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So that's the big thing right there. This is a great way to get more work done in less time. So training density definitely goes up. And we can argue effective reps all we want, but the training density is definitely up. So you can just look at total reps. Let's not even think about the effective reps. So you can do 54 reps in about 7 minutes, and that's if you're strict on 2 minutes rest between sets, which, on assistance work, that's not that crazy to think about, but 7 to 8 minutes. But if you did the Myo Reps and are really strict on only taking 5 to 15 seconds in between all the sets, you can get that done in under 3 minutes. So 54 reps in 7 to 8 minutes or 40 reps in 3 minutes. You could even have added another Myo Rep Set on there and could have done 45. So, you've achieved 70% more effective reps. That's what he's saying, in less than half the time with the Myo Reps versus traditional sets. Now, we're making a few assumptions here with regards to effective reps and time under tension, but I think it's easy to see that Myo Reps is an exceptionally time-efficient way of training. By all estimations, but most of all from my experience over the years, 1 Myo Rep set equals 3 or 4 normal sets. And this is key too if we're looking at it from, because I know kind of like the next question would be, okay, so if we're somebody who wants to track volume, like total volume that we're doing, how would you account for the Myo Reps? And that's what I always kind of look at it as. If we're doing the Myo Rep sequences, it's pretty equal to if you were doing 3 or 4 normal sets. So if on assistance work, let's say you were going to do 3 sets of 15 or something on a barbell curl. If you just do 1 series of Myo Reps, the volume is equated. It's pretty close. Or if you were going to do 4 sets of 10 or 12 on a barbell curl and you did 1 Myo Rep sequence, they're pretty equivalent. The next section we're going to talk about intensity. The section is titled The Work, Muscle Growth Relationship. Many studies and a lot of training programs for building muscle will tell you that 8 to 12 reps is a fail-safe recommendation. One study, authored by Brad Schoenfeld in 2014, demonstrated that the total amount of work may be more important variable. In this study, they compared one group doing 7 sets of 3 reps at 90% of 1 RM with another group doing 3 sets of 10 at 70% of 1 RM. Calculating the intensity numbers, the total amount of work is 7 sets of 3 at 90 is 1890, 3 sets of 10 at 70 is 2100. There was a small strength benefit in the group doing 7 by 3. This is due to the specificity of testing. If you test 1 RM and you're training 3 reps, you get to practice under conditions close to the actual test. So if you train close to your 1 RM, you also get better at demonstrating your 1 RM. This is incidentally also a good way to boost your 1 RM with a low total volume of work. Just work up to a 1 RM or close to it. Interestingly, muscle growth was almost identical in both groups. Turns out that the total amount of work is an important factor if we want to build muscle mass. While practicing the test can make us better at 1 RM tests, some additional work is usually needed to maximize hypertrophy. In practice, there were a few important caveats though. The 7 by 3 group spent 70 minutes in the gym and was completely beaten up afterwards. In fact, there were several dropouts due to injuries. The 3 by 10 group spent 17 minutes in the gym and everyone stated they could have done much more. So even though you build muscle just as well doing lower reps as doing higher reps, it takes more time and increases connective tissue injury risk. With lighter loads, especially loads used with Myo Reps, the injury risk is significantly lower unless you do something stupid or your connective tissue health is crapped. This was a landmark study. I remember 2014 when that came out, it was, it kind of sent shockwaves throughout the industry, and you had people who argue both sides of it. You'd have the bodybuilding crowd say, oh, see, 3 sets of 10 got done in a fraction of the time and was just as good, and people said they could have done a lot more. Then you had the strength community be like, oh, see, you can do real heavy weight and still build muscle. And they're kind of both right, in a sense. They're kind of both right. What I kind of took from it was, okay, so if we compare tonnage, total tonnage, and use that as a metric for volume, which you pretty much have to do in sets where you're doing less than 6 reps. If you're doing less than 6 reps, to equate volume between, so let's say sets of 3, you'd have to calculate tonnage, so total amount of work done, so sets times reps times weight. Now, when you're doing more than 6 reps and you want to calculate volume, you can just use the hard set method. But anyway, what I took from the study was there can be benefits to multiple rep ranges, meaning you still get some muscle building benefit from going heavy, from using heavy weights. And that's actually been shown in other studies too. When you get up to 80-85% and above, you can get away with less reps and still building muscle. But then it also shows you when you want to accumulate volume, it's just easier to accumulate volume in higher rep ranges. And you can get it done quicker. It doesn't beat you up as bad, and then you can accumulate more volume because you can do more work over time. Like you do 7 sets of 3 at real heavy weight, like man, you're beat up and it takes forever. You gotta take a lot of rest between sets. For strength, it's great because like he says in the book, it's more specific. If you're a powerlifter, the most specific thing you can do is a 1 rep max. So really the closest we can be to 1 rep maxes is going to benefit us the most for our 1 rep max. So sets of 3 at 90% is pretty damn close from a specificity standpoint to a 1 rep max. So it would make sense that it's going to improve our strength better. But when it comes to muscle building, accumulating volume, 3 sets of 10 works really, really well. All right, we're going to skip ahead a little bit and then continue in the book. There is a lower threshold of loading where the training effect diminishes, so it is necessary to use techniques like occlusion or Myo Reps when you lift weights you can do for more than 20 reps. There exists a certain threshold of work that you have to exceed in order to stimulate an adaptation, strength, and muscle growth. This threshold increases with training age and experience. However, a common misconception is that if you double the training volume, you also double the stimulus. Really what he's talking about there is when you're doing really high reps, it used to be thought that there wasn't a lot of benefit to high reps, like 30, 50 reps. However, there's actually been recent research that shows that as long as you take higher rep sets close to failure or to failure, you can get a pretty good muscle building effect from even up to like 50 rep sets. It used to be thought that you had to use like occlusion training, so blood flow restriction training with super light weights to get a muscle building effect. But there's actually been recent research that shows that, if you take it close to failure, you can even get a muscle building effect without blood flow restriction. But just a little side note there. Continuing on. If it was that easy, talking about doubling your training volume, we would all be massive just copying the high volume routines of Arnold or Ronnie. Anyone who idolized Arnold in the 80s or Ronnie back in the 90s knows for a fact this line of logic didn't turn out well as we hoped. Yeah, that's definitely true. Like, man, I remember the Arnold's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding. I've talked about it before, but the routines in there were so high volume. That's a lot of the shit I was doing in high school. I loved it, man. I loved that style of training, but it was like impossible to recover from. Continuing, even the famous German volume training protocol of 10 sets of 10 reps popularized by Poliquin in the now defunct Muscle Media in the year 2000 has been debunked by research. 5 sets was found to be superior to 10 sets in the study. Here is a pretty graph I made to illustrate this concept. So in the graph, if you're not looking at the PDF, it's an inverted U, so like an upside down U, where it shows the dose response curve for training volume with the number of sets. So you have 1 to 2 sets as is low, then it increases to 2 and 4 sets, and then between 4 to 8 sets it peaks, and then at 8 to 16 sets it starts to go down. As you can see, the dose response curve increases sharply at first, but then flattens out and eventually drops down into the proverbial shitter. Also, keep in mind that the lower end of the range is number of hard sets approaching failure, whereas the higher end of the range is submaximal training with more reps in reserve and or low rep training and inherently low volume per set. The higher end of the range also demands that all your ducks are lined up in a row: food quality, quantity, stress management, sleep, and biorhythm optimization. The high volume tolerance lifters also thrive and benefit from the higher end of this range. The reason for the shape of this curve is that excessive volume will require more recovery time. At best, you create low-grade inflammation and that soreness we all secretly fall in love with. This soreness may actually mean that our resources are directed towards repair and not growth. So it is probably wise to back off the next time you go to the gym. At worst, you get an acute injury or increase your risk of repetitive strain, injury, and overtraining in the long term. Nothing really revolutionary here, but really what he's saying is doing 4 to 8 sets is the sweet spot amount of volume per exercise. You know what I mean? So if you do 4 to 8, that's probably as much as you're going to get a benefit from. You start doing more than 8. I mean, you can make an argument for it in certain cases if you're able to handle more volume, or depending on how your training week is structured, you might be able to benefit from more than 8 sets of an exercise, but most likely not. The next thing he's going to talk about is junk volume, which is a pretty good concept that we can discuss a little bit as well. Junk volume. I know this is going to cause some controversy, but controversy is good. It means that it's making you think about the preconceived notions and hopefully reconsider certain accepted truths. As the years go by and I work with more and more people, I am becoming more and more convinced that you don't need as much volume as you think. Most lifters do way too much, something I call junk volume. Those who tolerate, thrive, or benefit from higher volumes usually have one or more of the following traits. Submaximal training, meaning they're keeping more reps in reserve, either by intent or because they're not used to going to failure. This type of high volume training works great for strength via the skill and practice, and the Norwegian powerlifters who dominate on the world rankings are renowned for this type of training. So either submaximal training, they have great genetics with a frame built for strength and muscle, young guys and girls with optimal hormone levels and great recovery, specialists who have worked up to tolerating that volume over years within their respective sport, or drug use. This includes some coaches who are obvious or self-admitted drug users. It's hard for a coach to avoid confirmation bias. I know I have suffered from it many times during my career. So my best advice for mitigating this is to always question what you believe is really true. A lot of the time, a belief can be true, but only in specific contexts, which is what inspired me to write this in the first place. For everyone else, we might think or want to belong to one of these demographics, but I think it is wiser to take an objective look at what hand nature has dealt us and do more intelligent investment strategy with our training efforts. I know you probably don't like to hear this, but when we get to a certain point, it'll be hard to even gain 1 to 2 pounds of muscle mass per year. How much effort and time are you really willing to put in to gain that much muscle? Answer that before reading on. I have lowered volume consistently with most of my clients and it has only provided better results. I have also had several previous high volume clients on rehab with the same story. Their gains were awesome in the beginning. They were constantly sore and tired, but had some great gains. Then they eventually experienced various aches and pains, and some of them ended up completely demolished. When all motivation to train is gone and when the joints and tendons are starting to hurt, but you still keep going because this study or that expert says it's optimal, I think we are, again, stuck in the mindset of general versus individual. So this is before we go on here, this is actually a really good concept to think about. And I think it's something that's happening in the powerlifting community a lot now because we have a survivorship bias, meaning we follow great lifters, whether in bodybuilding and powerlifting. You see a lot in powerlifting now. And because of social media, we can follow what they're doing. So we see the type of routines that people, this goes for volume and intensity too. Some lifters that it seems like they're always working up to very, very heavy. They're doing a ton of volume and a lot of intensity. And it seems like, oh, well, shit, they're the best lifters. Like that must be what it takes to be a top lifter. Well, yes and no. It's what they need to do to be at their best. And that's because they can handle it. They've worked up to the point to be able to handle that amount of volume, handle the volume combined with that intensity. We don't see all the people who have tried it and gotten broken down and quit or their lifts aren't very good. We only see the best lifters posting that. And we're only seeing a fraction of what people show us. We only see what they want us to see. We don't even know if that's how they're actually training. I know for certain. I mean, I've actually had conversations with people about their training and know for a fact that what they post on social media, I'm not gonna say it's lying, but it's misleading at best. Just misleading. You know, they make you seem like they're doing X amount of volume or X amount of intensity all the time, but in fact that they don't show you that actually there's a lot more recovery built into it. So I think in this quest to, I don't know, just chase what the best people are doing, you got to understand that everyone responds a little bit different. And just because so-and-so's following a certain type of program doesn't mean that's what's best for you. And oftentimes that's not what's best for you. At the end of the day, our goal should be to find what works best for us. Like what improves our training the best. What improves our physique and our lifts the best. Not to see who can do the most amount of volume or can work up to the highest lifts in training more consistently. I mean, a lot of times, yeah, that there are some correlations there, but not always. And when you're beaten up, hurt, unmotivated to train, that's a big red flag, big red flag. And this is something I've struggled with in the past. I mean, there's definitely times in my training where I've worked up to doing too much volume. And I've looked at it, in recent years, like, oh shit, I was doing way too much volume here, way too much volume at this period of time. And it just didn't work for me long term. Maybe had some short-term effects, some short-term benefits, but long-term just broke me down. The general recommendation is 10 to 20 hard sets per muscle group per week. And what I've found, specifically talking about junk volume, that people who do considerably more than 20 hard sets per week per muscle group, usually a lot of their training ends up being junk volume, meaning it's very far away. It's one of a couple things. One, it's just very far away from failure. They're just not getting close enough. They're leaving 4, 5, 6, 7 or more reps in reserve, and they're not approaching failure or getting close enough. They're not actually hard sets. They're easy sets, 2 easy sets, junk volume. Or exercise selection, just doing way too much assistance work, just like little exercises, just throwing in a bunch of accessory work at the end that you probably don't need to do, like a bunch of arm stuff and cables, and you're not really putting enough effort into the main movements that are going to facilitate progress, and you just end up throwing in a bunch of easy accessory work at the end. Perfect example is, people who are doing a bunch of leg extensions and leg curls, but not really going very hard on squats. And it's like, oh, well, I'm doing 30 sets for my leg workouts, 30 hard sets, and it's like 25 of it was leg extension leg curls, or 20 of it with leg extension leg curls, calf raises. It's like, okay, well, maybe we should be doing squats, RDLs, leg presses, lunges, Bulgarian split squats, and do 20 hard sets of that, and we'll see where you're at. Another thing to think about is this isn't like a hard and fast rule. It's not like you have to be exactly between 10 to 20 hard sets of every single muscle group. And you can do more. I mean, you can absolutely do more, and you can absolutely recover from more. And you can do specialization cycles where you specifically do more sets per muscle group and things like that. It's not like if you do 21 sets, all your gains are lost, you did too much volume. No. And there's individual differences, and depending on how you're built, you can possibly handle more or less volume on different muscle groups, different movements, etc. But the main point is, if you're way outside the realm, on both ends, if you're only doing if your goal is to improve your arms, and you're only doing 4 sets of biceps and 4 sets of triceps per week, well, you're probably not doing enough volume on your arms, enough targeted arm work to actually build your arms. But then on the flip side, if you're doing 40 sets for arms, let's look at that. Let's dig in there. Something's not right. All right, let's skip ahead and wrap this one up. Let's move on to the summary and practical takeaways. Here are my current recommendations. Number of hard sets per muscle group per week. Beginners, 3 to 9 sets. Intermediates, 9 to 18 sets. Advanced, 12 to 24 sets. Remember the rule of thumb when counting volume that 1 Myo Rep set equals 3 to 4 normal sets. I usually make people start in the lower middle end of the range and then increase if I see that progress is good or if they have a high work capacity. Progression increasing the stimulus. Humans are amazingly adaptive creatures, and given the right balance between stress and recovery, we can grow resilient to most things nature can throw at us. To grow bigger and stronger muscles, it is going to be necessary to gradually and progressively increase the loads you are lifting. If you're not getting stronger, and here's where keeping a training log is mandatory, you need to adjust something. It's really that simple. And here's how to do it with Myo Reps. If you reach the higher end of a given range, example 25 reps when doing 20 to 25, increase the load next time. If you barely hit it or don't hit it, the lower end of the range, decrease the load the next time or the next set. This way of adapting the loads to increase your progress curve is something I have been a fan of for most of my career. In fact, autoregulatory load progression has been shown in studies to be more effective than pre-planning loads, although this may also differ based on your personality, a topic for another time. So actually, what he's saying here is something that I actually like to program as well, but I actually like to make the ranges a little bit wider. So for example, one of the days of my benching, this is separate from Myo Reps, but one of the things I've been doing for one of my bench days is, since I'm training in my garage and I have a limited amount of weights, one of my high volume bench day early in the week, I've pretty much just doing 275. So my bench day is I'm using 275, and I set the reps for pretty much for the last month, but I plan on doing it for longer, is between 12 and 20. So I'm using 275 on bench for 4 sets, and my rep range is 12 to 20. And my goal is to build up to where I can do 4 sets of 20 before I increase the weight at all. So, for example, when I started, I did 4 sets of 12. And it was really, really hard. 4 sets of 12 with 275. It was really, really hard. I started that, probably like the 3rd week back benching. So I've probably been benching again for a month and a half. So I've probably done this for 3 weeks. And I've pretty much increased a rep every single week. And I think last week I actually did 15 reps. So I think the first week I did 12s, and this is all with leaving a rep or 2 in the tank. About an 8 RPE is the goal. So that's really what I should say. So it's 275, 12 to 20 rep range at an 8 RPE, leaving roughly 2 reps in reserve for all sets. And I'm just going to be playing with this for a long time. Like I said, last week I did 15. I think I'm doing it today. So we'll see. Probably I might actually be at 15 again this week because it was pretty challenging. But maybe I'll be able to get 16 for at least a couple sets. We'll see. But it's kind of set up to where you can completely auto-regulate it based on how you're feeling that day. So I might even do less than 15 for a set or two. You know what I mean? And you can auto-regulate it from a set-to-set basis too. So it's like maybe you do 15 for the first one, then 13, and then maybe you have to do 12 for the last two sets. But if you're finding you have to do lower than your rep range, so for me it would be 12 is like the bottom end. If I have to do 10, well then the weight's too heavy. So then I would have to lower the weight. But you want to pick a weight to where you can get 12 reps for all sets. So hopefully I'm not making this confusing, but this is something I've been doing training at home just because you got to be a little bit more creative when you have limited amount of weights and limited amount of equipment and things like that. So I plan on just, hey, my high volume bench day is going to be with 275 for the foreseeable future. And it's also kind of a cool goal to shoot for because, 4 sets of 20 with 275 on bench, that's nuts. I might be using 275 for months and months. It might be like 6 months that I'm using 275 on bench. And then, of course, you can throw in like deload weeks and things like that to where you're doing less volume. But it works also pretty well with other exercises as well. So don't think it's something that you can only do on bench. You can kind of do it for anything, on main lifts and do it on assistance work. And it also works really well for the Myo Reps, where you just pick a weight and you set a big rep target, and then you just stick with it for a long time. And when we're talking about the activation set. So let's say, for example, I like to do Myo Reps with weighted push-ups. So let's say I put on my vest and my rep range is 12 to 20, and that's what I'm just going to stick to until I can get to where I'm doing 20 reps for the activation set, and then I can bump it up. I can even bump up the reps to 25, or I can add more weight to the vest, or whatever. And with the Myo Reps, there's a lot of moving parts to auto-regulate things. So you can obviously auto-regulate the weight for the activation set, because you want to use one weight throughout. Like whatever weight you use, or your body weight, whatever, for the activation set is what you're going to use for the Myo Reps, the back off sets. So you can obviously auto-regulate the weight week to week, but then you can also auto-regulate the activation set reps. So from 12 to 25 is usually what I use. So you can start on the low end, build up to the high end, and then you can also auto-regulate the back off reps. So like I said, I like to use 25 to 50%. So based on how you're feeling and how each set feels, you can do more or less reps. And then if you happen to fatigue to the point where you have to do like less than 3 reps for whatever reason, just, call it off. But if you pick the right weight and you're in a good spot on the activation set, you should always be able to do at least 3 reps, or at least 25%. If you should be able to do at least 25% of the reps that you did for the activation set. And if for whatever reason you can't, then you stop short of the 5 total sets. But ideally, in a perfect world, you do the activation set 12 to 25 reps, and then you do 5 Myo Rep sets of 25 to 50% of the reps you did on an activation set, and you only take 5 to 15 seconds rest between the Myo Reps. Hopefully, you kept that all together. All right, so moving on, finishing up the book, talking about the best exercises to do. Due to the intensive and oxygen-demanding nature of Myo Reps and the higher rep training in general, I advise caution with exercises where the lower back takes a beating, such as squats, deadlifts, and bent over rows. Yeah, I don't do Myo Reps for any of those. Not only do you risk injury if your lower back gives out before your legs or arms do, but you will most likely also run out of breath before you're able to hit true muscular failure. Many have done it and have experienced great benefits, but you should work up to it gradually over time and make absolute sure that you have the endurance, technique, and lower back strength to tolerate it. Bench press can also be risky if you fail before you expected to and get trapped under the bar. Have a spotter nearby. Yeah, I like to do, mostly assistance exercises for the most part. That's kind of what he recommends too. He's like, it's obviously easier to do Myo Reps on isolation exercises where only 1 to 2 muscle groups are targeted. When you distribute the tension over several muscle groups in the compound lifts, some muscles will get more stimulation and might end up understimulated, such as the triceps or delts taking over in the bench press or the biceps taking over in pull downs or chin ups. I would still focus on compound exercises from a time efficiency perspective, but add in isolation exercises where needed. Personally, I like to do the Myo Reps with assistance work, but I like body weight stuff. I like to do pull-ups with the Myo Reps, weighted push-ups, dips, handstand push-ups. I also like doing like dumbbell benching, dumbbell shoulder pressing. Curls work great, like all variations of curls, like a barbell curl. Lateral raises work really good. Really, the options are endless. You can get creative with it, but for the most part, I like to do it with assistance work and then with exercises that it makes sense with. All right, we made it to the conclusion. A Myo Rep set includes the following. Choose a load between 30 to 50% of your current 1 rep max in an exercise, or simply use 15 to 25 as a rep range for the first set. The first set done to failure or 1 rep from failure is called the activation set. Continue doing up to 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps of the same load, but only resting for 3 to 5 deep breaths between sets in the Myo Rep series. And that's that. Really, at the end of the day, guys, it's just another tool. It's another tool to put in your toolbox, and it's something that can spice up assistance work a little bit, can increase the focus on assistance work and get it done, get that assistance work done quicker, increase training density. And man, one of the reasons why I like throwing it in is because assistance work can get boring. Just doing 3 sets of 10 to 12 or whatever can get boring. And it's almost like, there's almost like an AMRAP mentality to it, where since you have to be so locked in, meaning once you start the activation set, like you're locked in, like you do the activation set, and then as soon as you're done, you pretty much stay right there, take 3 to 5 deep breaths, go again, take 3 to 5 deep breaths, go again. Like you're not checking your phone, you're not talking to your buddies, like you're 100% locked in. I like that. That's how you get more work done in a short period of time. And it, it's just something different. When you've been training for a long time, it's cool to find different things to stay interesting in the training. And if it's a little bit more effective, great. If not, it might be more effective just because we take it a little bit more serious. We really want to push the activation set, which is a key point. You really want to push the activation set to a true 9 RPE or 1 rep in reserve, or even for some exercises, you can even go till, as long as you're maintaining good form, go to failure on it, and then it'll set you up well to do those back off sets. It's a great assistance exercise technique for hypertrophy or even for powerlifters, because really for the most part with powerlifters, you kind of want to train your assistance work as a bodybuilder anyway, especially when we're talking about things like dumbbell curls, barbell curls, lateral raises, things like that. For those of you who are visual learners, I will put the breakdown of the activation sets and back off sets and everything in the show notes, so check that out. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you want to take a look at the book, like I said, it's a free PDF download. It is in the show notes. If you want to check out any of my books, the links are in the show notes. Check out the programs in the show notes. If you're interested in coaching, kylehuntfitness@gmail.com. Send me an email. We can start the conversation. As always, this podcast is sponsored by PR Breaker. PRBreaker.com. Use the discount code HUNT10. Help support the Absolute Strength podcast and get yourself some good supplements. All right, guys, until next time, peace. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Absolute Strength podcast. I know I had a ton of fun producing it for you. And before you go, if you could just drop me some feedback, I'd love it. I love reading your feedback. So you can go over to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating, write a little review, what you think of the podcast. I absolutely love it. I read every single one. But it's cool if you don't want to do that. I get it. No one wants to really go out of their way to do anything, let alone write a review. But I want to get your feedback. So drop me a line on Instagram at Hunt Fitness, or on Facebook, Kyle Hunt, or on Twitter, or send a pigeon or something. I don't know. I just want to hear your feedback. So if you want to give me some feedback, let me know what you think. Hit me up on Instagram at Hunt Fitness. And before you go, I have one last thing I want to say. I have a program I want you to check out. It's actually called the Absolute Strength Program, and the link is in the show notes. It's a program I designed to help increase my own squat, bench, and deadlift. And I got pretty strong off of it, and I think you're going to like it. It's a great book. Thousands of people have got amazing results from it. It's in the show notes. All right, guys. Until next time, until next episode, peace.